¿Son realmente los humanos la raza más fuerte? En este video veremos si realmente los humanos están por encima de todas las otras razas. Dejaré el video original en la descripción por si quieren ir a verlo. Hola, yo soy Grastin y el día de hoy vamos a estar reaccionando a un video que se llama Are Humans OP? Nada, vamos a verlo. Tier Su. Welcome to RuneScape. Ese es el HUD, por ejemplo, de RuneScape. Mítico juego.
Human beings. Are they as
Ahí le puse
overpowered as the
subtítulos para
game's
los que
community
no.
would lead you to believe? Short answer, yeah. They're the most meta-defining build of all time, and the undisputed top build in the current expansion. But believe it or not, this wasn't always the case. Humans used to get bodied left and right on a daily
Tienen la
basis.
barra de vida arriba y todo, es que es
It took a pretty
increíble.
long time before the player base learned how to actually make use of the human build's unique abilities.
Para el que no lo haya visto, vamos a volverlo un segundo. Es que ¿sabías que el juego bloquea la contraseña para ti? Mira, y aparece el típico icono de las contraseñas cuando las bloquea.
Actually make use of the human build's
Que
unique
no way.
abilities. The story of the humans' rise to dominance is a really interesting one. And so today, we're going to do an in-depth look at the humans' abilities, their strengths, and their weaknesses.
Bueno, básicamente lo que está diciendo es que a ver si la raza humana está tan fuerte como la comunidad de jugadores dice que está. Y entonces ahora va a explicar por qué, teniendo sus fortalezas y sus debilidades. Pues va a explicar una a una.
Because yes, they do have weaknesses. We'll also go over notable matchups, and finally look at the steps human players took in order to reach their dominant status. First, their unique abilities. I touched on this topic in my video
Habilidades
about
únicas.
primates, but I'll recap here and also go into more detail. First off the bat, we have their ability to throw things.
Ujú.
Other builds can throw things, but humans can do so harder, faster, and further than anyone else.
Muy
The reason
cierto.
for this is their body structure. Bipedal builds are tough to balance, both in the game development sense and the center of mass sense. Throwing an item with
El desarrollo del juego.
requires serious balance, achieved only by having shorter arms and longer legs.
Por ejemplo, yo esto nunca lo había pensado. Una de las características superiores era lanzar cosas. Porque pues usted cuando ha visto que un animal lance una cosa con la misma potencia que la lanzaría, yo qué sé, alguien X, nunca. Entonces como que full a distancia tendríamos superioridad. Porque usted se encuentra a melee con un león, con un oso y paila, completamente paila. No tiene nada que hacer ahí.
This is why humans can launch projectiles at deadly speeds, whereas other primates kinda just lob things without putting much effort into it. If they tried to, they would knock themselves over. Even if chimpanzees could figure out how to craft a spear, there's no way they could throw it hard enough to deal any significant damage.
Tiene
There's
sentido.
stamina regeneration. Humans
Stamina
can chase down anything. You try to run from a human, you might outspeed them initially, but you'll run out of stamina much sooner than they will, and they'll catch up to you while you're in your weakened state. This is partially because of their superior balance again, but mostly it's
Pero eso
because
es
of the
cierto.
build's unique choice.
O sea, realmente nosotros podemos ganar en términos de estamina a cualquier animal. Porque usted se pone contra un caballo y pues le ganan sobrado. Si realmente uno le puede ganar en una carrera a cualquier animal. O sea, usted lo persigue un puma y ¿qué? O sea, usted está muerto, usted no tiene ninguna posibilidad.
To not spec.
¿Qué dice acá?
This gives them access to the extremely broken ability Sweat. Every other current build
okay.
that's decent at distance running
Es verdad.
charges stamina by using the move Pant. This works great, but it does
Que regeneran la estamina usando el movimiento de jadear. Es que los animales que tienen pelaje no suelen sudar. ¿Qué animales tienen la capacidad de sudar? Yo no conozco ninguno. Realmente eso es una característica muy OP que tienen los humanos.
require the user to stop running. Sweat, on the other hand, works better while moving, massively extending the distance a human player can run. They've got a few other important abilities that are essential to their kit, but aren't unique to humans. Their ability to speak is unique among mammals, but some birds can...
Es que esto también está muy OP. O sea, que una persona pueda hablar como que ya directamente desbloquea como una rampa de desarrollo demasiado superior a los demás. Porque los animales, bueno, tienen su método de comunicación y se entienden entre ellos con, pues, el lenguaje que tengan. Pero el lenguaje verbal es muy superior en cuanto a desarrollo de conocimiento, de investigaciones. Pueden aprender cosas demasiado rápidas y el que una persona lo aprenda y se la puede enseñar a otra. Es decir, la primera persona se demoró, yo qué sé, 100 años en descubrir algo y se la enseña a otro y la otra persona lo hace en una hora. Entonces esa otra persona puede dedicarse a desarrollar conocimiento que no han descubierto todavía y así sucesivamente. Y bueno, por eso estamos donde estamos, supongo yo.
too. In humans, the ability to speak allows them to use one of their signature moves, Teach. which drastically boosts skill point gain.
El primer movimiento, enseñar lo que está diciendo.
Getting a game over. Humans and birds also share another unique trait, which is being able to stand upright. Standing upright is extremely useful for dealing with stealth builds that might normally be using tall grass to hide. Tool use also might be thought of as a human-exclusive
Tool use.
and it certainly is the most effective.
Usar herramientas.
But it turns out a pretty wide array of other builds can also do it. Birds, primates, cephalopods, and even fish can use tools on occasion. But sweating
Pero
and
¿con qué
growing
efectividad?
is human. Now
Claro,
onto their weaknesses.
sumadas las otras
Yes,
características,
it's true that
estamos
currently
superior.
most human players can subvert these with their crafting skill. But it's important to recognize that without equipment, the human build isn't necessarily unstoppable. The decision to not have fur granted humans a massive buff to mobility at the cost of stealth. In the mammal faction, fur is a
Está
prerequisite.
diciendo completamente cierto que somos superiores con todas estas características, pero realmente sin equipamiento, sin armas, sin cosas que utilizar, no somos nada. O sea, cuerpo a cuerpo contra otro animal no somos nada. O sea, un animal que sea de nuestro tamaño, un oso, un guepardo, un león, no somos absolutamente nada. En lo que sí podríamos ganar, digo yo, de competencia es en la inteligencia. O sea, yo digo que ese es como el único factor que tiene el humano, así de serie, con el que spawnea, que es la inteligencia. Obviamente los animales tienen instinto y en combate están mucho más acostumbrados. O sea, ellos están mucho más acostumbrados a situaciones de riesgo, lo que sea. A uno le pasarán cosas 2 veces en la vida de realmente riesgo. Entonces, ojo ahí, porque cuerpo a cuerpo
Requisite to all the major stealth abilities
no hay
like
opciones.
camouflage. And lack of stealth abilities means getting in close on their targets is a serious challenge. The human build's lack of fur also means they have very low defense,
Wow,
both
brutal
from
esa
physical
película.
attacks and from environmental effects. Their skin offers almost
Total.
zero armor, to the
Total.
point where even players from lower weight classes have no trouble dealing damage to humans.
Jugadores con
Their skin also takes quite a bit of damage from
Es que
the
somos
sun.
débiles, realmente somos
Humans are also
débiles.
pretty limited when it comes to the power stat.
Muy delicados.
Basically, they're the weakest of the great apes, and don't really have any good options for dealing damage. They lack the
Damn!
don't really have any good options for dealing damage. They lack the
Ouch!
classic high damage bite attack that
Fuck.
nearly every other non-herbivorous build relies on, instead having to resort to blunt attacks like punch
Uy,
and kick.
yo he visto ese video re viral,
Very
pero
effective.
yo nunca supe si eso fue real o no. Ese video fue real. Se conocen de algo también, tipo está entrenado, es un oso no hostil, porque a ver si salió vivo, ¿no? O sea, se le ve chill dentro de lo que cabe, pero
Very effective against builds that have thick fur or skin.
claro,
The last major
sin
weakness I
equipamiento,
can see
solo
is
a
that they're
puños y
pretty bad at
patadas, no
dealing
tenemos
with
opción
stealth.
ninguna.
The lack of night vision means
Completamente
darkness
cierto.
can really hamper their ability to locate targets, and their lack of a strong sense of smell means camouflage is especially useful against them. Okay, now let's talk about matchups. Obviously, a key feature of the human build is being able to
Es que es brutal la manera en que lo
craft
narra.
equipment. Given basic equipment like low-level armor and hunting gear,
¿No?
the human's best matchup is going to be medium-large mammals. Unlike blunt damage, piercing damage is quite effective versus builds with thick hide, but on defense they're actually pretty awful. A human's only option on defense against a large mammal is intimidation, unless they've got some crazy high-level equipment. But I'll make a video on power creep later. The classic human equipment cannot stop a charging tank main unless the intimidate attempt
A
works.
charging tank.
But overall, this matchup is one of the reasons humans became top tier. Hardly any builds have favorable matchups against tanks. But that's not to say humans don't have their counters though. As I said before, stealth can be really effective against them due to their lack of a keen sense of smell and night vision. Humans have the ability to win pretty much any fight as long as they've got time to prepare. But taken by surprise, humans have a lot fewer options. Another thing humans have trouble dealing with is flight. Even when a human has a
Flight.
ranged weapon, players with high aerial mobility are pretty safe during flight. Now, as far as
Total.
I know, there aren't any bird builds powerful enough to one-shot humans, which is important because blunt attack
No hay pájaros suficientemente fuertes para one-shotearnos. Eso es cierto. A ver, no, ni el águila, ni... No, solo en la prehistoria. Hoy en día no existe.
attacks
Muy
like
bueno,
punches
muy bueno.
are actually quite effective against
Bing.
birds. Birds have hollow bones that are resistant to tension and torsion, but not compression. This is the opposite of mammal bones, which are resistant to compression and tension, but not torsion. The point is, birds aren't the best choice against humans, but flight has been unlocked by 4 different classes in the game. Birds, which we just discussed.
Eso es lo que digo yo. Es que el vuelo se ha desbloqueado por 4 distintas clases en el juego. O sea, estamos literalmente en un juego.
Aren't a good choice. Bats, which do even less damage than birds. Reptiles, which unfortunately had their aerial builds banned in patch 1.3.1. And insects. Flying eusocial insects have by far the best matchup versus humans in the entire game.
Más uno de veneno.
Have zero counterplay against a swarm of stinging insects. I mean,
Uy,
sure,
qué
there are
miedo.
special items that they can use to combat swarms if they're prepared.
Y aquí estuviera Donovan, que tiene fobia a las avispas y demás.
Humans' lack of fur means they have no innate defense.
Es que somos débiles, o sea, la piel así al aire
to proc the
no es nada.
anaphylaxis debuff, which can actually lead to a game over. And it's for this reason that the
A
high
game
score
over.
for human eliminations belongs to the Africanized honeybee,
Y aquí no hay
known better
second
by
try.
its community-given name, the killer bee. And even if the stings don't proc the allergic reaction effect, they will still definitely achieve their primary goal of dropping their resolve to 0 and granting you control over the territory. And we can see that lately the viability of killer bees has only been growing now that they've expanded their territory outside of Africa. Which brings me to my main point. Are
Damn,
humans
la
overpowered?
invasión.
Well, just like the Africanized honeybee, humans really only became OP once they escaped the African server and invaded other areas. Notice how
Que se los devolvieron realmente fuertes desde que escaparon el servidor de África. O sea, en este momento, ¿ustedes de qué servidor son? Yo estoy en el servidor de Colombia. Y qué bueno, qué
humans
bueno.
took down megafauna across every terrestrial server except Africa. The African tank mains
A ver,
have the
¿qué
magic
dijo?
experience
Me
and
encanta.
counterplay the African server and invaded other areas.
Ajá.
Notice how humans took down megafauna across every terrestrial server except Africa. The African tank mains have the matchup experience and counterplay options to deal with the vast array of skills humans have access to. But the rest of the community was totally unprepared to deal with the rapid invasion of new human mains invading their competitive scene. In other words, the devs could have prevented the massive destabilization of the current meta if they'd region-locked humans. Staying competitive in the meta requires
El
a player
meta.
constantly be
O
leveling
sea,
up
hay
their
meta y
skills.
todo.
There's no better example of this than the rapid rise to dominance that humans experienced. If you'd like to level up your own skills and unlock new ones, I highly recommend
Se acabó.
Skillshare.
Muy bueno, muy bueno. Nada, increíble. Ustedes pensaban que íbamos a ser superiores que los humanos. Digo, que los animales. Que los humanos. Ya me creo un reptiliano acá. Pero, claro, realmente somos muy débiles, pues, en el servidor en el que nacimos. También lo que estaba mencionando ahí de la capacidad de aguante con las temas de enfermedades, de cambios meteorológicos. Mucha diferencia. Muchas gracias por ver este video. En la descripción encontrarás todas mis redes sociales por si quieres seguirme. Y recuerda suscribirte para estar pendiente de todo el nuevo contenido que voy a estar subiendo. Chao.